On March 20th, 1952, Henri de Contenson, a young French scholar, mounted an expedition to scout desert terraces and cliffs in the Judean desert. The team was looking for more Dead Sea Scrolls, but they were racing against the illicit Bedouin excavators. It had been 5 years since the first Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. As sons of the desert, the Bedouin proved to be expert scroll scouts. This time, however, it was the archaeologists who got lucky. They came across a large natural cave. The cave's entrance was narrow and rock-covered, barely perceptible to the scanning eye. For 11 days, they carefully cleared a mountain of debris. The cave had once contained dozens of scroll jars, but they shattered from the crushing weight of a ceiling that had collapsed in antiquity. All that was left from the once robust library were 5 intact jars housing disintegrated scrolls. On the last day of the excavation, the team noticed that a large limestone rock was hiding what appeared to be a lesser side cave. Like a false wall for a castle's secret chamber, the rock camouflaged the nook and barred it from intruders. Curious, the diggers carefully chipped through the chalky barricade. Resting alone on a low shelf were 2 stacked copper rolls. The scroll's strategic position allowed it to narrowly escape the collapsed ceiling. Nature had created the perfect hiding place for the most intriguing manuscript in the Dead Sea Scroll collection, the Copper Scroll. Rather than papyrus or leather, the Copper Scroll is inscribed on thin sheets of almost 100% pure copper. Copper was particularly valuable in ancient times and much more strenuous to inscribe. Each letter had to be hammered out with chisels. The choice of copper indicated that the contents of the scroll were of such importance that the scribe wanted to be sure it could withstand the ravages of time. Originally measuring over 7 feet long and a foot wide, the scroll is one of the largest ancient metal documents ever found. But after 2,000 years, the copper coils were green and brittle. The scrolls crumbled at the slightest touch. No one knew how to open the rolls without destroying them. For 3 years, the scrolls sat in a museum in Jordan. For the rest of the Copper Scroll story, tune in next week or check out my new book, The Copper Scroll Project. Hi, this is Shelley Neese with Jerusalem Connection. We have completed our reading through the Torah in 1 year, and many people have asked me if we will start over with the calendar readings or do the Haftarah or the New Testament. But instead, for now, I am starting a new series called Qumranology. I have a new book out called The Copper Scroll Project. Because it is the thing occupying a large portion of my mental space, I want to share bits and pieces of information about the Copper Scroll, the Essenes, the other Dead Sea Scrolls, and Qumran with our subscribers. Last week I told you how the Copper Scroll was found, but for 3 years it sat in a museum in Amman, Jordan, unopened. In the beginning, the Copper Scroll didn't set off the kind of alarm bells that you may expect. The black market was flooded with Dead Sea Scrolls, most of which were very fragmentary. It was a tremendous struggle to keep up with buying them, piecing them together, and publishing them. The process turned out to be decades long. That had a lot to do with the fact that Jordan established a very small team of editors, all international experts in Hebrew and Semitic studies. But of course, Israel was the enemy, and so no Jewish scholars were allowed on the team. John Allegro, a scroll editor from Britain, was the only team member to champion the Copper Scroll. Allegro was determined to get it opened and find out its message. Allegro approached Manchester University, his alma mater. It was Henry Wright Breaker, a professor of mechanical engineering, who agreed to take on the task. Not because he was an expert in ancient metals, but he had faith, skill, and guts. He constructed an elaborate, although crude-looking device out of retired British Army materials and other tools he borrowed from the School of Dentistry. The machine had a circular, high-speed saw, spindle, cradle, vacuum, and an attached fan. After Baker constructed the machine, he told Allegro to meet him back at the lab the next morning. But in fact, Baker made the first lengthwise cut that night, and it worked. He later said that if he had shattered the 2,000-year-old relic, he wanted to be alone in his misery. When Allegro came to the lab the next morning, he was staring at an ancient verbal treasure map. He fired off a letter to his colleagues in Jerusalem saying, "These scrolls are red hot." Next week, stay tuned for the rest of the story. Hi, I'm Shelley Neese, Vice President of Jerusalem Connection and author of the new book, The Copper Scroll Project. In the previous weeks, I've talked about what the Copper Scroll is, where it was found, and how it was opened. But now I need to tell you what it actually says. John Allegro, the member of the Dead Sea Scroll editorial team responsible for overseeing the opening of the Copper Scroll, never doubted the scroll's historicity. To him, it was an eyewitness record of a momentous clandestine event. But Allegro's excitement was tempered by concern from his other colleagues that the news of the Copper Scroll's contents would set off a countrywide treasure hunt. If the Bedouin heard of underground gold and silver, it was possible they might raise entire archaeological sites. The scroll's potential was downplayed in the press. The New York Times ran a front-page story on the Copper Scroll. They mocked its authenticity, writing that the manuscript was something that might have been written in blood in the dark of the moon by a character in Treasure Island. Truthfully, though, the Copper Scroll is a difficult text to read and understand, composed in a form of Hebrew unlike the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The method of spelling and word choice gives it a first-century period of production, which puts it in line with the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But of course, you can't carbon date copper, and translation problems are rooted in the Copper Scroll's etching. The handwriting is unskilled and often crowded, making it difficult to know where one word begins and the other ends. The scroll has 30 scribal mistakes. Several letters are incomplete or backwards. In bad spots, text was lost to deterioration. On occasion, the scribe writes in cursive instead of the formal Hebrew block letters. In the last several columns, there are 12 in total, the writing gets progressively garbled. I'll give you a sample of what the scroll sounds like, though. It's a verbless inventory, lots of dry instructions about where to dig for gold and silver. It says, "In the ruin which is in the valley, pass under the steps leading to the east 40 cubits, a chest of money and its total, the weight of 17 talents. In the sepulchre monument, in the third course, 100 gold ingots. In the great cistern of the courtyard of the peristyle, in a hollow in the floor covered with sediment in front of the upper opening, 900 talents. It goes on like that for 12 columns and for over 60 locations. If you were one of the first ones to lay eyes on this 2,000-year-old treasure map, where would you think the Copper Scroll treasures were buried? Where would you think to look?